Fade. All right, I think we're live. I think we're live. All right. Hopefully everybody out there can hear me. I'm just gonna double check my levels. All right, guys, gals, thanks for tuning in. Doing another live video here from Kona. We did this one once before, so if you've seen it already, I apologize. Maybe you'll learn a couple new things this time. We'll talk about pretty much the same subject, though. We want to just give everyone some tips on how to brew the best cup of coffee you can at home. Now, there are we think 5 main points to doing the best cup of coffee. Let me get my system set up right here. Sorry, guys. All right, there we go. So, first thing is the coffee and how you store it. You want to make sure you got good quality coffee and you're storing it properly. You also want to use quality water. Your coffee is only going to be as good as the water you put into it. It is more than 90% of what is in your cup, the water itself. The ratio of coffee to water is going to affect the flavor. The grind size is going to also affect the flavor of your coffee, and there is no right answer to either of those last two. And then temperature and time are also very important too. Again, there's no perfect answer for these, but it's about knowing how to control them to make sure that you're getting the flavor that you like out of your coffee. So first off, the coffee, make sure you're getting fresh coffee. Make sure you're going for higher quality coffee. Just like every product you use, you want to make sure you're using something that's better. The cheaper stuff is cheap for a reason. You'll never be able to get a good bag of coffee from a grocery store or a major market retailer because that's going to be stale old coffee. Fresh roasted coffee will have its best flavor from usually about a day or two after roasting and only lasting for around 4 to 5 weeks tops and as little as 2 to 3 weeks for the absolute best flavor. So like wine, coffee is not something you get and open and start drinking and let sit around for a while. Unfortunately, unlike wine, it doesn't stay in the bag when sealed either. So when you buy coffee, you want to make sure it's fresh and you want to just drink it. Buy as much as you need for a month, drink that, and then go get more. Or if you're like most of us coffee drinkers, you'll have no problem here. You're going to need to buy coffee every couple of weeks if you buy it by the pound. Because an average coffee drinker is going to go through a pound of coffee in about 2 weeks or even less, depending on how much you actually drink. Now, storing your coffee is important. Do not store it in the refrigerator. It tends to add moisture to it, as well as potential smells and flavors from your fridge. And storing in the freezer is only used after a month, just like the freezer is pretty much used for everything. You don't start with the freezer, except for your ice cream and your popsicles. You put the coffee in the freezer after a month, and that will preserve some of the flavor that's left, from keeping it from going bad. But for that first month, cool, dry, airtight, that is all you need to do. Store it in your cupboard, out of the sunlight, and make sure it's in a sealed bag or package or container of some type. And that'll keep your coffee tasting amazing for the first 2 to 3 weeks, up to 4 to 5 weeks. So there's coffee. Now, water, very, very important. Use quality water. Now, a lot of people are lucky. They have pretty good quality water coming out of their tap, but most of us don't know what we have coming out of our tap. Here at Heavenly Hawaiian, we do have county water, but we use a filtered water that we bring in, and then we remineralize it. The proper minerals will actually improve the flavor of coffee. No minerals will actually not brew very well. It needs minerals to do the extraction, but too many dissolved solids in your water and you're going to be hampering your extraction and potentially damaging the flavor of your coffee. So we always recommend that you use a good, even TDS in your water, total dissolved solids. There's no perfect answer there. Or if you really want the best possible coffee, go with a filtered water and then use something like Perfect Water. They actually use a company out there that offers minerals in packets or larger containers that give you the exact minerals you need to brew the best cup of coffee. And that's what we use here in Kona. Make sure that we're always highlighting the proper flavors and not losing any of those flavors in the brewing process. Now again, not all of us can control all those variables, and if you're concerned about your water, going down and getting it just good bottled water from the store, buy a gallon or two. It's usually not that expensive, and you can use that for brewing your quality coffees, and you will see an improvement in the flavor and quality. And we'll be doing a little more digging into this, each one of these steps too, talking about a lot more of the variables as we do some more research and more testing and find out more about them. So keep an eye out for more about water as we go forward. Now the ratio is very important. They usually recommend a ratio of 1 to 15 to 1 to 18, and that is grams of coffee to grams of water. Now this is going to affect the flavor, and each coffee can be different. Each coffee drinker will be different. You're going to like it depending upon your personal preference and taste. I personally use a 1 to 16 ratio, and that's very common, but people who like their coffee to not be so bold in flavor, you might like something in a 1 to 17 or 1 to 18. Or if you need that caffeine jolt and you like that coffee to really have a strong mouth feel, 1 to 15 might be for you. And do not feel bad if you like 1 to 14 or 1 to 20. The ratio is important to just keep an eye on so that you can get the consistent flavor in the cup. You want to know what it is. And the only real way to actually track the ratio is to weigh everything. You need to have a scale to weigh the coffee before you grind it up, and then you're going to want a scale to not only make sure that you're not losing a lot of coffee in your grinder, but you're going to want to weigh the water that you're adding to your coffee. Because 1 cup of water, if you just fill up a regular pitcher, you're going to actually have a different amount every single time. It could be off by only a couple of grams, and some people might not notice that difference, other people will. So personally, every morning I weigh the coffee, I grind it, and then I weigh the water as I'm pouring it in. So a good quality scale that can handle the weight of your brewing device as well as the coffee and the water is important if you're looking for the highest quality. And there's many ranges of scales out there. We're going to also do a video about that, so you can keep tuned later for more about that. So now we're on to grind size. The grind size is important for flavor again. Now there's many options for grind size. It's not just fine, coarse, medium, but coarse tends to be more sour and acidic, lower extraction. Fine tends to have more bitterness to it, a little more astringency to it. And each person is going to have a preference. Each coffee could be different, and brewing methods can help determine the way you want to grind your coffee as well. They typically recommend, actually I think I have a, nope, I don't have a slide about it, sorry. So they typically recommend going with something like a coarser grind when you're using a French press. This actually is because you're using a longer extraction and you want to limit the amount of fine particles that might be in your cup afterwards. You're always going to have some, and for me, that's the personal way I make it at home. I don't mind that little bit of coffee grounds in the bottom of the cup. It's not going to hurt, and I usually don't even drink that part anyway. By the time I get to the last half inch, it's cold and old. I just dump that out and make new coffee. I didn't really lose that much. But you can also go finer. If you've got coffee that doesn't have enough, you like the flavor, but you want it bolder, you could do a slightly finer grind and increase the flavor. But also knowing that you're going to start to increase the bitterness and astringency at the same time. So there's a fine balance that you're looking for there between sour and bitter that tastes good to you. And then you're all the way down to your ultra finely ground coffee for things like espresso. That is because you want to build the pressure, allow maximum surface area for that very fast 20 to 30 seconds worth of extraction time to get all the flavor out you can. So that's why grind size is important. And it is good to use a good grinder. We always recommend using a burr grinder, B-U-R-R. It's not a brand or a company. It is a style of grinder. It actually uses discs or wheels to crush the beans as opposed to fine powder, which you get from the blades. So using a burr grinder, you're going to be able to control the grind size and get a very consistent grind size. I've actually heard a lot of people say that if you don't have a burr grinder, it's better to pre-grind your coffee than to use a blade grinder. Now, pre-grinding is something we don't recommend either, because once it's ground up, the flavor starts to diminish rapidly. You can notice a difference in flavor in just a few hours from grinding it and brewing immediately to grinding it and letting it sit, especially if it's exposed to air. Now again, not everyone has the luxury, but if you do pre-grind your coffee, I recommend making sure it is in a very tightly sealed bag. Recommend freezing it immediately to maintain the flavor. It's not going to be perfect, but it will be better than letting it go stale. So there's a little bit about grind. Next, we've got the temperature of water you use. They recommend 195 to 205 degrees in temperature. And again, there's no exact answer here. I found that different coffees I like at different temperatures. One of the rules of thumb is the higher the temperature, the stronger the extraction, and usually, again, increasing that bitterness and astringency side of things, whereas the cooler the water, the lower extraction, moving you more towards the sour and astringent side of things. But I've also found that my fruitier coffees, the ones that are either naturally processed or have a lot of fruit notes, I can detect them more using slightly cooler temperatures, and the ones where it's more chocolatey, more smoky, the darker side of flavors tend to be accentuated by the higher temperatures of water. So I personally use anywhere from 200 to 204 degrees, depending upon what coffee I'm brewing. And here in Kona, we pretty much consistently use 204 degrees just to kind of give an even playing field and brew all the coffees in a similar method and highlight their flavors. So temperature is important. You can use a thermometer in your pot. You can use a regular tea kettle, and once it's boiling, pull it off the stove and you let it sit for about a minute, and you should be below the 205 range. That can change upon altitude. A little experimenting can help to nail this in. But we also like to use here and at home, I use an electric kettle that has a direct timer built into, temperature gauge built into it. So I don't just turn it on and it boils water. I turn it on and tell it what temperature to heat to, and it'll stop and hold it there. So I can set it to 204 degrees and then grind my coffee, get my coffee mug clean because I didn't wash it out from the night before, and then my water's ready. Pour it in, start brewing. So then that leads us to brew time. Now, the brew time, again, is another factor that you're going to control for your favorite flavor. They do usually have various differing ranges. Pour-overs are your longest at 3 to 4 minutes. French press also around 3 to 4 minutes, 2 to 4. Some people like it very short. Espresso is your fastest, 20 to 30 seconds. And I guess let's not forget cold brew. Cold brew is anywhere from 12 to 24 hours, and I have heard of some coffee shops making concentrate doing 72-hour-long brewing of cold brew in the fridge. Now, the brew time is important because, again, it's going to affect the flavor. You can adjust it with pour over and French press very easily by just paying attention to how fast you're adding the water or how long you're letting it sit before you plunge and pour. Espresso, you usually don't have as much control over your brew time, but your grind size will affect it in seconds, and that will affect the flavor. So if you're trying to control grind size, brew time with espresso, you're usually looking at subtly changing your grind size a little bit too, which will affect your brew time. And then of course cold brew, very easy to control the brew time there because it's just how long do you leave it in the fridge. And then you've got your electric pots, your Mr. Coffees and others like that, where you have almost zero control over brew time unless you go to some of the very expensive high-end models, and there are some benefits to going with those. Quality construction, proper temperatures are reached or can be controlled, and brew times can be adjusted. And eventually we're going to get to a video on those as well. We're going to try to cover all these different topics. This is just kind of the overview, the intro to what we plan to talk about more. So controlling all of these variables, everything from the coffee, the water, the storage, ratio, grind size, brew time, and temperature, they're all going to change the flavor of your coffee. Being able to control them is going to help you brew your best cup of coffee at home. Now, I know I started off having zero control over almost any of it. It was just coffee, grind it up in my blade grinder, throw it in the Mr. Coffee maker, and then I added a bunch of cream and sugar because it never tasted right. But being able to control these variables, I have now been able to start to create amazing cups of coffee that really have a lot of subtle flavors to them, and being able to do this has allowed me to decide what type of coffee do I want this morning or this afternoon or for a special occasion. I can really dial it in and create very unique flavors in the coffee. Actually, I haven't been checking the comments. I don't know if anybody's been looking at the comments or commenting at all, so I'm just going to see real quick if anybody has any comments. Let me see here. Well, interesting enough, I don't see any comments, so maybe nobody wrote any comments. It's all right. If anybody has anything to ask any questions, feel free to just let me know. Just not seeing anything right now. But again, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for checking out the video. We're going to post more stuff like this. We're actually going to start going live every single Thursday with things like this, or more in-depth topics about coffee in general, maybe about some of the things that we're doing on the farm, new information. We also are hoping to do some interviews with people in the industry, not just here on the island, but roasters and coffee shop owners, and maybe some random guests or whoever we happen to just rope in. Those might be in person, or right now probably more digital. So like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you're like our page on Facebook, and look for the notification bell on YouTube. And I believe they have something similar on Facebook, so you get the notifications when we're going live. And then all the videos will be archived. You can check those out too. And we're going to keep putting out the content on the other stations and channels as well. So anyway, hope you guys have enjoyed and learned something a little new today. And if you know any other coffee enthusiasts out here who you think they'd like some of this information, please link them to, and help kind of grow our online following here. We're trying to just keep engaging everybody now that you can't come visit us anymore, so we'll come to you right where you are.